Okay, here's the situation. You're responding to a call in your community. There's an intense wildland fire spreading towards a neighborhood. As you arrive, things are happening quickly. A task force is assembling. Maybe they're career firefighters, maybe volunteers. Everyone huddles, ready for action. All they need to get going is a safe strategy and access to water.
We're going to put up a portable pump there for a fill station, and this is going to be your only other fill station.
You've got a good water plan in place. It worked well a month ago when you put out a house fire, and the month before that with a small brush fire. But this time, things are different. You've never faced a wildland fire like this before, not even close. Firebrands will soon be dropping, spot fires appearing. You'll be dealing with multiple exposures and a lot more fire than your water resources can put out. So, what do you do now? Good question. It's just the wrong time to ask it. No doubt your fire department has an area water plan. You may not have fire hydrants like in the city, but you do have a few engines and a water tender. If a home or a business catches on fire, you know where to get your water, how to transport it, and how to use it to extinguish the fire. For example, let's say that this is your town. If you have a stationary burning structure over here, you'd transport your water from, say, here. But what happens when you have an intense wildland incident like this one? Instead of a single burning structure, you've got a rapidly moving line of fire. And before long, as spot fires appear, you'll also have multiple ignitions to deal with. Your point-to-point water strategy suddenly goes out the window. Rather than saving one structure, you're trying to protect a whole neighborhood of structures. You now have a new water logistics problem on your hands. So, with limited equipment and a small crew, how do you possibly transport water and hose lays to all of these structures? The answer is, you don't. Let's go back to our opening scenario.
Okay, what I'd like to do is deploy the Forest Service 2 engines and the DNRC engine, the state of
As you recall, your task force is ready to move into action. You've assessed the situation. The fire over the ridge is uncontrollable, and you've got more structures than resources. So it's time to shift from an offensive strategy to a defensive one. What does that mean? It means that instead of trying to stop the fire, you're going to do your best to prepare these homes so that they'll withstand it. Then, just before the fire arrives, you're going to move to your safety zone and let the fire pass through. You'll then return as soon as it's safe to mop up or overhaul any structure starts or spot fires that threaten structures. The key is to stay mobile at all times. Be smart and creative and react quickly as the situation changes. The results of this strategy may surprise you. You could wind up needing a lot less water than you'd expect. And if your homeowners have applied FireWise principles, you'll use even less water. Okay, so you send your engines or tenders off to the stream to get water. At the same time, you split your crew into teams and direct them to locate structures. The first step, before anyone squirts a drop of water, is to know which structures can be effectively protected, and that will depend upon how well these residents have prepared their homes. So you triage the homes for extreme conditions. Your teams apply their knowledge of fire behavior and the ignition potential of these structures.
And again, you mentioned the deck. We'll get that cleaned off, sweep all the needles off of there.
Then you'll determine the level of protection that each one will need and balance the needs of the entire neighborhood against the resources available to you. That may mean having to make some tough decisions. If you decide that a group of homes will consume too many resources, you may have to leave them unprotected. Time and water are limited. You can't afford to waste either. A home or community built with FireWise principles in mind could resist ignition without assistance. For example, spraying water on a fire-resistant roof would waste resources and time. The way the property is maintained can also mean the difference between success and failure. A resident can help avoid disaster by practicing FireWise maintenance, such as removing these pine needles on the roof and in the gutters. And these fine fuels could easily be ignited by firebrands or carry a surface fire that would jeopardize the home. As you can see, there are also some heavier fuels near the house. And don't overlook this wood pile over here. The assessment? With enough time to prepare these vulnerable areas, this home has a decent shot of surviving the fire. Okay, so how do you prepare a structure? Your gut instinct may be to charge the hose line and drench the home and yard, but that would waste water and time. You'd probably deplete your water supply and leave the rest of the neighborhood unprotected. Instead, consider this thought. Sometimes your most efficient use of water involves not using water. Just ask Lee Buller of the Creston, Montana Fire Department.
In doing mitigation, we try and go in and limit the use of water to start with, and try and remove the brush and debris away from the house and off of the house.
What we look for is the proximity of the vegetation to the structure. If we're dealing with a lot of vegetation within a 30-foot buffer zone, we want to try and thin that down as best we can, as quick as we can, depending on rate of spread of the fire. We don't have to clear everything out, but we want to try and get good separation in the tree canopy, 15, 20 feet. So maybe every other tree or something we might want to thin out of the location.
If there's a lot of debris in the gutters, in the gutter drain system, or up on the house, we'll try and remove those. If it's easier to just take the gutter down, sometimes that's very feasible, and especially with like plastic or vinyl gutters, they have a chance to catch on fire and be the ignition source of the house. If they have a bunch of lawn furniture or stuff sitting on the deck, we'll take and remove that from the house and get it away. That kind of stuff catches a lot of embers, and we try and do this all before the fire comes. And that way we'll have our water available to use. If it does start burning, we'll be able to use that water to put that out.
By removing some flammable vegetation, you'll both eliminate fuel and save your water for other uses. But this tactic only goes so far. You'll need water to wet dry vegetation in the yard and vulnerable parts of the house. Which means bringing out the big guns and soaking everything, right? Probably not. A heavy stream works well to extinguish structural fires, but in our situation, it would deliver too much water to too small an area. Not only would it be overkill, it would defeat our need to stay mobile. Imagine having to move these hoses from structure to structure. It'd take forever. You'd exhaust your crew. Plus, you'd waste water every time you disconnected and recharged. Instead, you want to use a smaller hose, something like this, the homeowner's garden hose, with its ready-made supply of water.
If they've got a garden hose or a spigot outside, we'll try and use that water to wash off the deck or the roof of the pine needles, and try and just use their water instead of using the water that's in the truck.
I can put that garden hose into my booster tank to recover what water I'm using, so I'll still have as close to a full tank supply in my engine. And as the fire approaches, that's when I start using my water very sparingly. As I get ignition, I try and get extinguishment.
If it keeps you from having to go to the dump tank one time and you're able to stay there, it just helps you prolong your time before you have to leave that house to go get more water or have more people bring you water. And every little bit helps, so anytime you can save water, you try and look for that.
Remember, we're thinking on our feet and staying mobile. A small hose with a spray nozzle works well on these fine fuels. You'll wet down a larger area faster than you would with a straight stream while consuming less water. You don't need to drench the entire yard or any